This video was made possible by sponsors like you. Thank you for supporting us on Patreon.
That's dope.
Hey Toonies, I'm WHYBOY and this is NERO.
Hey.
So it's safe to assume most folks have Netflix, right? Especially during this year.
For those unaware, somehow, Netflix is a streaming service where you can get access to a lot of shows from television, films from theaters, or exclusive content made strictly for the service.
The brilliance of such a service is that we can get shows that studios will be more hesitant to put on TV, so we can get experimentation in writing and animation that you won't see anywhere else.
So just sit right back and relax as we tell you about 10 Netflix cartoons you should binge. Green Eggs and Ham. So when it comes to the late Dr. Seuss, his adaptations have had mixed results, to say the least. This one does it right. They take the book and use the core concept of the rhymes as the springboard for each episode. Thus, they take a book of whimsy rhymes and transmogrify it into essentially planes, trains, and automobiles through the warped, wubulous window of Dr. Seuss. Each episode costs $5 to $6 million to produce, and wow, this show definitely looks that good. It resembles a traditional drawn animated film, but is extended to a 13-episode run, meaning you're basically getting a great-looking traditional animated film for hours. And the pacing flows gently yet quickly from one to the next and doesn't hit any bumps. The voice acting is spot on, the humor being both childish and yet sophisticated. There's a whole Les Miserables bit in there, and I didn't even get it on my first go since I'm uneducated filth, but on the second viewing. Season 2 has already been announced at the time of this recording, and after Season 1, I can safely say I can't wait to get a second serving of Green Eggs and Ham.
Love, Death, and Robots. This one is really unique. It's sort of like, well, think Disney's Fantasia if it drank a milkshake made of various degrees of energy drinks and listening to metal music. Love, Death, and Robots is an exploration of animation for the adult viewer. The content in this series is very mature rated, not for kids. Themes of sex, violence, death, and existential torment litters the stories, and the visuals, whether surreal, oppressive, vibrant, or anything in between, complement the story it tells and lets it run wild through this series. LDR is an episodic anthology series of what feels like a collection of pilot pitches for movies, shows, and even video games. The experience watching this is enjoyable as the various stories and locales is so diverse and engaging, but it's also very exhausting. A lot of the stories tend to have a dour and melancholy ending, so while we could suggest binging it as it's very creatively diverse and engaging, there is a caveat that you might just want to binge this one in moderation, as the depressing elements can become very taxing on your mind. That aside, this series has a little bit of everything. A little bit of love, a little bit of death, and even a few robots.
Disenchantment. The most recent series from Simpsons creator Matt Groening, and while it's a bit slow at the start, once the pieces fall into place, it's very good. And in terms of his other shows, Simpsons, Futurama, I think Disenchantment beats them out just a bit. It's like a slightly more adult Adventure Time. The show follows the 19-year-old teenage princess of Dreamland, Tia Beanie Maria Beanie de la Rubo Grunwitz, better known as Bean. The story follows her misadventures along with her annoying sidekick Elfo and her charming personal demon Lucy. The show takes the tropes of Matt Groening's past work and whips it up into a big old bowl of gumbo. You got most of the Futurama cast returning, the trademark animation style of Matt, and all the archetypes and Easter eggs you can expect. Bite my shiny metal axe! The show is also co-executive produced by Bill Oakley and Josh Weinstein, the creators of the underrated sitcom Mission Hill. The two reunite and take what made Mission Hill so unique and turn a medieval fantasy, off-color black comedy animated sitcom and allow for it to have progressive storytelling. There are arcs, stakes, character developments, character deaths. The good stuff that stops sitcoms from becoming stale. At the time of this video's recording, it's been reported that a Season 2 is on the way after the completion of Season 1. If you want a good laugh, solid animation, and to see what this team can do without the overbearing eyes of Fox censorship, then you won't be disappointed with Disenchantment.
Kipo and the Age of Wonderbeasts. Adventure, action, comedy, and science fantasy are genres Nero and I adore exploring, and Kipo does that in spades. Created by Radford Seckers and adapted from his 2015 webcomic Kipo, the series released earlier in 2020 and has 2 full seasons comprised of 10 episodes each, out and ready for binging. The series follows the adventures of Kipo Oak, a 13-year-old girl exploring the surface world in search of her father after being forced to flee from her underground city. It's a little bit like the Avatar series with the expansive world building, bizarre creatures, and diverse characters. The animation is done by Studio Mir, the folks behind the Legend of Korra and Netflix series Voltron the Legendary Defender, using traditional animation methods, so it's really a step up from the typical television slog. Speaking of, because it isn't typical television, the series allowed free reign to explore LGBT content without corporate mandate meddling. Because that's still somehow an issue in 2020. The series is a quick watch, and if you or your siblings have enjoyed the likes of Gravity Falls, Steven Universe, or Amphibia, then Kipo and the Age of Wonderbeasts is the next big adventure to set out and explore on.
Voltron, Legendary Defender. A reboot of the Voltron franchise and the Japanese anime series Beast King Go Lion. I never grew up watching this show as a child, but my friends who are nostalgic for this junk and vastly older than I am loved it. But coming in as a new viewer to this franchise, I really dug this series. The show follows 5 Earthlings thrust into space and piloting a set of 5 living mechs that resemble lions, kind of like Zords, which can then combine into a super duper robot called Voltron, and it's like this big cool robot knight. Together, they battle the tyrannical Galra Empire, which are basically like space orcs, who seek to conquer pretty much everything and anything in the known universe. The animation, voice casting is all excellent. The pacing got a bit slow, but I don't really put that on the show, even though the show's a bit lengthy. I put it more on the release schedule because they shifted how the show was being released initially, but now that the whole series is out, it's a lot smoother in its transition, so you probably won't run into that problem as much. Now, like I said, the show is a bit lengthy. It's 8 seasons, 78 episodes, so if you're settling in for the long haul on this one, but I think you'll enjoy it. It's a mix of Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, and a scoosh of Shakespeare. This is Voltron, Legendary Defender.
Glitch text. Seeing as Nickelodeon is in the habit of treating shows horribly that have narrative elements, thank God Netflix became the home for glitch text. A show about video games and gamers, and unlike other attempts where the writing sounds committee design trying to understand these kids today, glitch text's character and dialogue sounds very natural, albeit goofy at times. But that's really the charm of the show. At the core level, Glitch Text is a well-written action comedy series about fighting the monster of the episode while presenting the idea in a new yet familiar way. The bold and flashy animation gives the series its own visual footprint, making it memorable. This is from the studio behind Rise of the TMNT, so no surprise there, since that show just oozed animated action. And the familiar sense comes from its homages to game titles like Castlevania and its characters both main and side, presented in a diverse breath of fresh air. A lesser studio would use diversity to earn brownie points, but Glitch Text uses it to create a cast of gamers across a wide spectrum that's both grounded and familiar. The only flub right now is that the narrative aspects feel underexplored in the 2 seasons we have so far. But hopefully, with enough support, we can see Glitch Text given the chance to level up to Season 3.
The Transformers Trilogy, War for Cybertron, Book 1, Siege. Autobots wage their battle to destroy the evil forces of the Decepticons. It's as tale as far back as 1984. If you're like me, you've been around Transformers. As the 12th installment, and yeah, I know how that sounds, it does sound like that's been a lot of reboots, and it is. But this one goes for a breath of fresh air approach by playing it up as a dramatic war story. At least for the first season. We don't know if they'll get into maybe more kiddie stuff as the seasons progress. Now, the animation is pretty solid, and my only real criticism comes from a little bit of the look and a little bit of the sound. I mean, visually, the show nails that look of G1, and the sound effects and music is solid. It catches that 80s feel to it. It's pure weaponized nostalgia, but it's the voice acting that throws me off. I feel like I'm watching a Wonderland version of the series where it seems like it's the things I know, but it isn't. Like, Optimus Prime sort of sounds like Optimus Prime, but doesn't. The same can be said by a number of the Decepticons, like Soundwave, Shockwave, and Starscream. They sound like G1, and then they don't. It's really weird. It's that amalgamation of nostalgia that makes the show lack just a little bit of its own identity. I kinda wish they did a bit more of their own thing like previous installments, like Transformers Animated or Transformers Prime. That said, this is still a solid show of honor, deception, and war, and the effects it has on people. With book 1 complete and 6 episodes out, it certainly is a quick watch, and with 2 more books on the way, this is a show that's a bit more than meets the eye. Yep, I rolled out that chestnut. Boom, and I even did too, because I used the rolled out line.
The Last Kids on Earth. Children's horror has always been a genre Nero and I have felt is vastly underplayed. There's this consensus that if something is made for a younger audience, you essentially have to baby them. That a genre like horror must be made strictly for adults, or that its requirement to be bloody and gore-filled. And that's simply not the case. In reality, the genre only needs to frighten its audience, and that can come from frightening imagery, atmosphere, and circumstances. The Last Kids on Earth provides this, allowing there to be a sense of dread along with having emotional and physical stakes, without the need to dumb it down. Based on the book series of the same name, The Last Kids on Earth is inventive, pulling inspiration from horror tropes of the zombie apocalypse and Lovecraft's other dimensional horrors, while incorporating an enticing mystery behind the event that led to the freshly brewed apocalypse. The natural tension and drama of being a teenager, and the tangible danger that could be found in this environment. It's a fairly easily digestible series that we both enjoy, and say children will get a delight out of with its unique creatures, world building, and what it means to be a teen growing up in the apocalypse.
Hilda. How to describe this show? Okay, well, it's like Gravity Falls in terms of mystery and mystical atmosphere and, monstrous creatures, and then it's blended with the wholesome warmth and delight of Paddington Bear. Based on the award-winning graphic novel series written and illustrated by Luke Pearson, the series follows the adventures of Hilda, a fearless girl who moves from a cabin in the countryside to the city of Trollberg, where she befriends even the most dangerous monsters. Hilda is just a warm-feeling series, mixing the strangeness that Hilda encounters with an atmosphere and aesthetic that feels cozy and inviting. This isn't to say there isn't stakes or downright great horror elements in the show. There's plenty of that. Hilda balances all this and allows it to not lose sight of that sense of adventure, exploration, and most importantly, fearless fun.
And lastly, The Midnight Gospel. Trippy is the easiest way to describe this show, but this trippy art style is the vehicle for the heart of the show, that being the podcast of Duncan Trussell. Acting as an almost highlight series of his podcast, meeting Duncan Trussell playing himself as sort of a slacker wizard, follows his discussions with guests as he goes to parallel worlds to interview people for his podcast, The Midnight Gospel. He talks with guests about perspectives surrounding death and spirituality, all in a very relaxing, au naturel conversation format, because the show does take podcast clips and slightly contextualizes them with a story. A zombie apocalypse, animals being run through a meat processor, a love barbarian, all these out there visual concepts wrap around very introspective discussions. It creates a very ASMR feeling, as while you may be distracted by the weird visuals on screen, what the characters are saying is vastly more profound and spoken in a way that is calming and relaxing. There's no in-depth narrative to entice, but if you like the idea of just a calm and mesmerizing cartoon, akin to the experimental home movies, then this is something for the eyes and ears, and we think you should tune in for The Midnight Gospel.
So there you go. 10 Netflix cartoons you should binge.
Or be responsible and watch in moderation. Don't go making yourself sick.
Yeah, don't sacrifice your health for entertainment. Now, are there some Netflix cartoons that we missed that you think we should be checking out?
Then type out hashtag ToonGrin 10 along with your recommendation down below so others can enjoy some of your pitches and they might show up in the future on ToonGrin 10.
Thanks for watching. Your views and interaction really do help keep us going. If you like this video or have a suggestion for future videos, please leave a comment below. And if you like what we're doing, please don't forget to subscribe. You can also support us by joining our Patreon or making a purchase at our TeePublic shop. All proceeds go to future projects and to help keep the lights on. Links are in the description, and as always, be sure to tune in to ToonGrin.